Hello, everybody. Great to have you in church today. My name's Evan. If you have never met me, welcome here. I'm just glad to have you. I'm also glad to have you if you have met me before. But you are amongst a number of people watching from a number of different places, taking part in church. And we believe this isn't just a you watch and that's it kind of thing, but actually this is a God is moving in your home and in your life right now. So thanks for being part of that with us. Together we seek Him, together we worshiped, together we pray, and then together we're just going to take part in this sermon together. I'm going to share something that I believe God's laid on my heart, but I also believe that God would be working actively in you to allow you to receive it, something that you're meant to hear today. So welcome to church. We're so glad that you're with us. We're starting a new series today. It's called Circles. And you're going to know a little bit more about why the word circles came up for us a little later in the series. But circles has been something that's been on the news even a lot lately. We've been hearing about circles, or maybe you know them as bubbles sometimes, where we've been hearing through this whole season of COVID that we have to stay within our circles, or we have to stay within our bubbles. And at first, that was a very small circle. I can remember when that first came out all of a sudden and the government started telling us that we got to lock down, and you know, I didn't really know who my circle was, but essentially it's like whoever's in your house is your circle. Like whoever you live with right now, has become your circle. You don't chat with other families or your extended families or people elsewhere. This is just your circle. It's right here. You lock in and don't visit physically anyways anyone outside of that thing. I remember hearing from a lot of different people at that time. Some people, the introverts in the space, the people who kind of have been longing for that a long time, some people are like, yes! I don't have to see anyone anymore. Like there's no social pressure for me to actually engage with people that I don't like or that I don't want to be around. Or I just get to sit on my own and drink my own coffee and work on my own online stuff and do my own thing in my own house and clean my own. That's all I have to do. This is the best thing ever. Some people, that was one extreme. And some people run on the other extreme, and they were either like really upset about this or else just disregarding it altogether. They're the people who, like when you're at the grocery store in those early days, you remember those early days of COVID where everyone was sort of on guard and you like grab your toilet paper and maybe you're like 5 toilet papers and run, like get out of the store. And as you're sort of in there and staying away from everyone and sort of feeling like you shouldn't even be out of the house at all, these are the people that come right up beside you like, oh great, I'll take one of those too. And you're like jumping away from them. And because some people were just like, nah, it doesn't matter. This is all a big hoax. I'm just going to go ahead and be my happy, joyful self anyways. Who needs a hug? Like, anyone want a hug? I just want to hug everyone because I'm not going to believe in COVID. I'm not going to worry about COVID. So we've got these extremes. Some people are like, you know, I gotta hide away from the world, and in fact, I kind of like it. And some people are like, I'm not hiding away from the world. I like the world too much. I'm going to go out everywhere that I possibly can be. I love those two different personalities. Most people probably landed somewhere in the middle where they didn't mind being on their own for a purpose for a period of time, but were looking forward to a little bit more interaction. And the bubble has been expanding, hasn't it? The circle has been expanding. We've been sort of trying to see what it looks like to be with a few more people and expand beyond just our family. And now we're a little bit more and trying some outdoor gatherings. In fact, we just did an outdoor gathering in Port Alberni last Sunday, and it was an amazing time. We did a worship night on a field, and it was just incredible. If you're from Port Alberni or if you were there, it was just a really fun time. Thankful to get to sing with people, to worship with people. I hope you'll join us for the next one if you're able to. But it's an amazing time. We're starting to see that we can extend the circle a little bit, grow the bubble a little bit. It's not just this tiny little group. It's a broader group. And when it was this tiny group, it was kind of nice when it got a bit broader, because when it was the tiny group, some people were offended when they weren't in your circle. It's like, I don't know. I just landed on this circle. I didn't know who to connect with, and I'm sorry if some people weren't in my circle, and I can't have everyone in my circle. I'm not that person who's hugging everyone at the supermarket. We're sort of just trying to do what the government is asking and trying to figure this out because our inner circle matters. When something like that comes up and we're looking at a sickness, a pandemic in the whole world, we recognize, yeah, it kind of matters who we're around. If we want to look out for how we're doing in our health, if our goal is to stay healthy, then maybe we need to be aware of being around sick people, of being around those who are not doing well. Let's give them a bit of space for a period of time. Let's care for them in different ways, but we're going to pull back a little bit because we recognize as far as a pandemic goes, as sickness goes, that if we want to be healthy, we kind of need to be with some people who are healthy. If we want to be healthy, we probably wouldn't try to do an inner circle with a bunch of people who are already sick. We would probably pull away for a period of time. That's why we're doing things like quarantine and all of that in that period of time. For the most part, that makes sense to people. For the most part, people think, well, don't want to be sick. Don't hang out with the sick. Don't want to get COVID. Probably try to stay away from people who have COVID for that period of time. And though most of us understand that in our physical understanding, our health understanding, a lot of us don't understand that as far as our hearts are concerned, as far as our soul is concerned. We get that hang out with sick people, become sick, but we forget that there's a lot that can happen to our heart also. That if we want to have a good heart, if we want to be in a good spot, if we want to live for Jesus the way that we believe that He wants us to live, if we want to do the things we believe we're supposed to on this planet, if we want to live out the mission that we believe God has given to us, then we need to recognize that our heart matters in this. And if we want a healthy heart that's ready to respond to God, ready to obey Him, ready to be content, ready to be generous, ready to be all of the things it's meant to be, then we have to be aware of what we expose that heart to. We have to be aware of what our circles look like, because the reality is no matter what our tight circle was during COVID or during that first little outbreak at the beginning, still your life was made up of a whole bunch of other circles. You had the circle of people who you see at grocery stores. You have a circle of neighbors that naturally kind of bump into. Maybe you keep at a little bit of a distance during that time, but you're seeing them and they're around. You have a circle of coworkers maybe if you still had your job, and there's people, you're maybe keeping them at a little bit of a distance, but there's that group of people. And so our life is always going to be about the circles that we're engaging in. We all are going to have coworker circles and neighborhood circles and team circles and church circles and family circles and friend circles and the inner circles. But at that point in COVID, more than any other time, we sort of recognize the need to be influenced physically by only an inner circle. And the same is true for our hearts. If we want our hearts to honor God the way we believe they should, we need to be aware of what influences we allow in. We need to be aware of who is in our inner circle and how are they shaping the way that my heart is responding to God. How am I doing in my heart? How am I feeling towards God? Am I complaining more, or am I being thankful and walking in gratitude? Am I feeling bitter and unforgiving, or am I discovering this new gentleness and humility in my heart? How is your heart doing? Now, how is your soul doing? And did you know that the inner circle that you allow into your life will shape the health of your heart, will shape the health of your soul as it pertains to your ability to follow God and His plans for your life? Because the reality is we all want to care for many people. We all want to engage with many circles, but we need to know that our circle will define many things about who we become, who we allow into that inner circle. See, that's the problem. Because we recognize that some people have influence on us, maybe when we don't actually want that. I know there was one guy I hung out with for a long time, and he had this really ridiculous laugh. Like it was just a goofy laugh, but I liked him, and I decided not to discriminate against his laugh. I decided I can still be friends with this person, so be it. It's fine. If you have a funny laugh, I'll still accept you and love you. It's okay. But I started hanging around this person all the time, and all of a sudden, some of my other friends started saying, "You laugh like him!" And I'm like, "What? No, I do not." No, what in the world? I don't know if that was a laugh. I forget. But I all of a sudden started laughing like him, and I'm like, man, the thing that I used to like have to look past to enjoy this person, now I'm doing the exact same thing. It was just because I'm around him all the time. I've allowed his laugh to infiltrate my mouth, and all of a sudden I'm laughing like him. See, we hang around people for a long time, and whether we want them to or not, the people that we have in our close circle are going to influence us, whether it be physically with COVID, or whether it be in our hearts, or whether it be in our laugh, whatever it might be. If we wanted to work out and make working out a big part of our life, we probably would make our inner circle to have a bunch of people who work out. If we value family, then probably we're going to pull in our family and the others who value that same thing. We often circle up with our hobbies. We circle up with the people that do what we do, that look like we look, that act like we act, that think the way we think. That's often the way it is, because the reality is, for every single one of you and me, we are going to be influenced in our lives. So a tendency, during COVID, this was sometimes people's tendency, is to say, okay, if health is my primary goal, I better never open up the circle. I'll just stay in this circle for the rest of my life. These people are safe, they're healthy, I'm happy, I'm not going to get sick, this will be perfect. Some of us think that way for our hearts too. Okay, if I want to follow Jesus and do what he asks me to do, then I better just, here's my group of friends, and these people all want the same thing, and this is what we will do, and this is what we will believe, and we'll never leave this group. It's safe, it's healthy, my heart will be good, this will be perfect. I'll be so happy right there. I'll never leave this circle. I'll never leave this bubble. The problem is this. Jesus says things like this. Go into all the world. Go to all nations, baptizing all people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. He says things like this. Go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the world. That's where I want you to proclaim me. I want you to go to all people. Well, Jesus, that's a big circle. That's a big bubble. I might be affected. I might be influenced by them. If I go out to that space, what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't do things that I'm supposed to do? I want to follow you, and what if they don't want to? I want to live for you, and what if they don't want to? What if I'm unable to do that at that point because they start to influence me? See, Jesus asks us, prays for us even, to be in the world, and yet not to become like the world. John 17:14-19. Jesus is praying, he says, I have given them, that's us, your word, that's God, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. Now hold up a second. Jesus just said the world has hated them. Who? You and me. Jesus just said the world has hated them. Like, well, wait a second. I thought you told us to go to the whole world. Yes. And now you're telling us the world hates us. Yes, you're getting it. Good for you. He says, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world. I don't want them out. But that you protect them from the evil one, that they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. So yes, in the world, but no, not of the world. Well, Jesus, you want us to influence them? Yes. And you want us not to be influenced by them? Correct. You want us to be something to them and never become what they are? Yes. You want us to show them your way and not take on their way? Yes. So you want us to get close enough to influence them, but not to be influenced by them? Correct. How? He goes on, he says, sanctify them. That essentially, for this purpose, means set them apart. Make them holy. By the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. Then John 15:19 says, if you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. I want to tell you how you can make the entire world love you. Act like the entire world. If you want to be loved by someone, just become just like them. Behave in exactly the way that they will love, and then all of a sudden they will love you. But Jesus didn't say, head on into relationships and become whatever that person might want you to be and see if they might love you. He didn't say, head on into the world and become whatever your classmates might like, and all of a sudden they'll like you. Head on into that workplace and become what all your coworkers will like, and then all of a sudden they'll like you. He says, head on into those places, and they're actually not going to like you sometimes, because you're not going to bow to them. You're not going to become them. You're going to be something different. Because I want to bring them something different. I want to give them something different. I have something for this world. Matthew 5:13 says, you, that's us, are the salt of the earth. Does anyone like salt? Anyone like salt on their meal? My son, he just goes for it. Hardy, he's just like, here's my meal, and we got one of those Costco salts, and sometimes he flips up the wrong one, and it doesn't even have like the shaker holes in it. It's just this one big hole. It's like, and he's just like pumped when that happens. You are the salt of the earth. In other words, when you're sprinkled in a situation, and when you're sprinkled in a classroom, when you're sprinkled in an office place or a workspace, when you're sprinkled into a family or a friend group, you taste different, you look different, you behave different, and yet it's sort of nice. And if people would be open to it, they might discover that taste is actually helpful or beneficial or good to them, or that they don't actually have to be complaining all the time, but that gratitude actually feels good to them. He says, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So Jesus gives us this really hard challenge, which is why we're doing this series. He gives us this challenge that whatever circle we find ourselves in, wherever we are, it's your neighbor circle, it's your workout friend circle, it's your team circle, it's your family circle, it's your friendship, friend group circle, whatever circle we find ourselves in, we're meant to be salt. We're meant to offer something to that circle. We're meant to influence that circle and not be influenced by it. So he says, that's all you got to do. You just have to influence all of those things and share me everywhere you go and be like me everywhere you go, and that's it. And all you have to do is that and never be influenced by those people to become like they might be, to become to follow some of the behaviors that they follow. I just want you to be different. And you're like, yeah, no problem. But how? How do we do that? How can we be part of all of those circles and keep influencing them different and not eventually be influenced by them? And here's what I think Jesus shows us. The next 5 weeks, we're going to look at how Jesus did this. He shows us that sometimes we need to order our circles. In fact, always we need to order our circles. That though he calls us to be part of every circle, he calls us to be part of the whole world. He invites us to be influential over the whole world, in all of our spaces, our communities, our province, our nation, our world, into all of the different areas. He invites us to be influential in all of those spaces, but he also orders his circles and shows us how to order them. That the ones that we would put closest to us are the ones that can actually affect us. The ones we choose to listen to their voice loudest, the ones that we spend the most time with are the ones who will naturally influence us. All of us will be influenced by our circles to some extent. And so which ones do we give a voice to is a question. For the next few weeks, we're going to look at the circles that Jesus had in his life. The circles that he held closest to him, and then the circles that allowed him to start to influence circles that were broader and further from him. For 5 weeks, we're going to look at his 5 circles. We're going to explore what those look like maybe for us. For you, what are your 5 circles? Which voices do you allow to speak into your ear the most? Which people do you allow to be closest to you? Just like when COVID happened and you pulled a few people close to you and said, if I'm just with these people, I'll be healthy. Who are the people that if you are with them, you know that they're going in the same direction as you, that you know that you're going to grow together, you know that they have your best interest at heart, you know that they're not going to try to sway you away. Who are those? Who are you putting closest to you right now? Because the who you become usually, almost always has to do with who you put closest to you. And so here were Jesus' 5 circles. The ones who he prioritized, the ones who he allowed to influence him the most to the least. The first one was the Father. Jesus actually said, we'll talk about this one next week, Jesus said, I don't do anything unless the Father told me to. I don't speak anything unless he asks me to. In other words, Jesus has a relationship with the Father that he says, the only influence happening between me and the Father is the Father to me, not me to the Father. It's one-way influence there. It's purely, God, what do you have to say? And then here I go. That's it. I'm not going to say anything back. And do you have that in your life? Next week, we're going to get into that more, but I just want you to be thinking about who's that loudest voice. Who is that? If it's not God, who is that in your life? Who's the person or the thing or the coach or the whatever it is that if they say it, you don't question it, you just do it. Who is that person in your life? We usually have one. We usually have someone or something that's driving that. If they say it, then I'm listening. Reality is, for some of us, it's our enemies. The naysayers, the people who want to hurt us, and they say it, and it hurts us so much and it crushes us so much that we change the way we behave, we change the way we live, we allow it to influence us so much that the person who's supposed to be far out, in a circle far away, all of a sudden comes a little too close, starts to influence the way we behave. So Jesus' first was the Father. The second one was Peter, James, and John. His chosen 3. Only 3. That was 6 that I just held up. 3. He had these 3 guys. And in 2 weeks we'll talk about them, but for the most part, these guys had the exact same things in their heart that Jesus had in his. Jesus knew where he was going, and he put 3 people around him that would help him, that would challenge him and empower him to continue to do what he's doing. He was going to have a big influential part in their life, but he also recognized that the people closest to him shouldn't be trying to pull him off track all the time, but should be lining up with where he wanted to go for the Father's sake. His third circle, which he'd give a little less influence to and from, but still pretty significant, was the 12 disciples. He had his 3, but then he had his 12. And his 12, they'd speak into where he was at. Usually they lined up pretty close with what he was doing, but he had to challenge them a fair amount. He had to speak into their life a fair amount. He had to shape them a fair amount, and he recognized that. But he pulled them close enough that they weren't people who were going to try to disrail his whole thing. His whole ministry. They weren't going to speak against his Father who he'd prayed to, but they were going to come alongside him for the most part. That's 3 circles that in general are going to say, we're with you, Jesus. Gave a lot of time to the Father. He gave a lot of time to the 3. He gave a lot of time to the 12. and also allowed them each to have some influence in his life. The fourth circle that he had was the crowd. The crowd he knew was a little bit more fickle. He didn't usually allow the crowd to have influence over his life. He knew that he was going to be there to have influence over the crowd's life. But you know how it is. If a crowd all of a sudden speaks, if lots of people are saying one thing, it can be very challenging to continue on the path. If everyone starts saying, go this way instead, and you're already moving in this direction, it can be very, very challenging to stick with the track that you've decided you're going on. How do you do it? And Jesus showed. He showed it because that's my fourth circle. I'm not going to give that circle that much influence. I know they're trying to pull hard, but I have to see everything they say through the filter of first what my Father says, then what these 3 say, then what the 12 say, and then I see what the crowd's saying to me. So if it's speaking against what my Father and the 3 and the 12 say, it doesn't really mean much to me at all. So did Jesus disregard the crowd? No. He went to them. He cared for them. He looked after them. He had influence on them. And the fifth circle that we find Jesus kind of being a part of is his enemies. See, Jesus showed us in the way he acted. We're not meant to be this kind of tight little group over here hiding away from the world. Jesus said, actually, you go to where your enemies are. Not only that, but you pray for your enemies. You pray for those who persecute you. You love the ones who hate you. This is what you're going to do. And you go, Jesus, well, how would you do that? How would you be willing to love people who hate you? How would you be willing to pray for those who are persecuting you? How would you do that? Usually when people hate me, I sort of cower, or I sort of feel bad, or I lash out, or I fight back against them because it just doesn't feel right and I have to prove something. So how do you do it? And I think Jesus would say, well, because the Father said so. And if the Father has said so, and now my 3 closest friends have confirmed it in me, and now my 12 have pretty much agreed with that, and the crowd doesn't really know what they think, well, then I'm going to do what my Father said, because he's the one who gets a voice in my life, not my enemies. I think it's really good for us to order our circles. And so for you today, I just want you to be considering who gets your inner circle. Because sometimes we have it a little bit flipped. Say, you know what, God, I do agree with what you say to some extent, but who's really right is the crowd. Majority rules. You're one, they're lots. I'm going to give more attention to them. Maybe you hear the crowd's voice because you're spending a lot of time on Instagram. And your followers have become the greatest voice in your life. You've done a lot of those slides, those whatever votes. Do you like this or this? Maybe God says he wants you to wear a different outfit, okay? He says, actually, I want this one, please. No, I don't know if God's going to speak into your outfits. But you know, we listen to the crowd sometimes, or sometimes it's our enemies. We spend so much time focused on what people are saying negatively about us and all the things that they're speaking against us that we start to go, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I haven't been as good as I thought. Maybe I'm not as nice of a person. Maybe I don't have as much value as I thought because my enemies have said so. Can I just encourage you? Don't give your enemies your inner circle. If your enemies are sick in the heart, don't expose your heart and say, why don't you dump some of that unhealth into me? It would be like saying, I'm trying to stay healthy by hanging out with all of these people who are sick. Or should we never go to the sick? Of course we should go to the sick. In fact, we're going to see in the coming weeks that Jesus goes to the sick and actually brings them in and cares for them. But first he sees, here's where we're going. Will you come with me? See, Jesus had momentum. He had a direction. He was moving in a space. And these people were sick. He was calling them out of the sickness. They were healed and walking with him. And he said, now come in my inner circle. Or my second circle, actually my third circle. Learn from me, grow with me. I hope you're going to have people in your life who think differently than you. If you don't, you're probably not living a very Christian life. But I hope that you don't put them right in the middle of space and say, hey, tell me what I should believe. I hope they don't take up that core circle of your life so that you would do anything that they say and follow any direction that they give you. For the next 5 weeks, I want us to consider how we can order our circles. So, who's in your core circle? Maybe you want to, in this moment or this week, take a paper and pencil and write down in the middle your name. Put a circle around that. And then do a circle around that one and say, who's the voice that's loudest? Who would I say yes to easiest? Who if they said it, would I change the way I think? Is it God? Or is it someone else? And build the next circle. Who's next in your life? The next, maybe you could go 5 circles, and what are the areas of influence in your life? Probably that 5th circle isn't influencing you that much, so you have the ability to be salt in that circle without it changing you and making you less salty. God has asked you to be part of all circles in your life. But if you don't have your circles ordered right, if you're not hearing influence from the right spaces, you're not going to be very effective at influencing any of them. And you'll be influenced by all of them. So as you consider those things in your own life, I just want to pray for you. I want to take a moment because next week we're going to talk about Jesus having the Father in his central circle. And maybe you need to already prepare your heart for that, because maybe you're really resistant to that idea and say, no, everything else needs to shape how I understand God and shape how I understand the Bible. I want to invite you to consider the idea that perhaps God has a bigger mind, a more expansive understanding of the universe and of your life than you do. And he wants that space in your life where he can direct you and lead you and call you into different places than you would have gone on your own. So I just want to pray for you. If you'd like to receive what God has for you today, maybe you just want to raise your hands like this, close your eyes with me, and allow him to speak. God, thank you that you've called us into all spaces in this world because you care for every single person. There's no one in any circle that you don't want to be reached, that you don't want someone to go out and care for them and love them. Lord, you said you came for the sick. You said you came for the ones who sort of don't fit in some of the inner circles right now. You came for them. You, the mighty one, you, the true God, you came and you actually brought them in. So thank you that you care for all of those people. Help us to do the same. But God, I just pray that you'd show us who we're allowing to speak loudest in our lives. Show us what circle we're allowing to shape who we are, what circle we're allowing to influence us, which way we're allowing people or ideas or groups to lead us. God, would you raise us up to be influencers? We know we're going to be influenced. So God, would you allow us to put the right things in place, the right people in place, you in place, so that we're influenced in the way that you're calling us to go. Help us to be honest with ourselves about who's actually shaping our thought process, who's actually shaping our actions, who's actually telling us what is good in life. Lead us, Lord, to your way. Lead us back to saltiness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.